Marshall Run in Falks Run, Virginia, and I'm here to talk about culverts and fish passage and culvert repair and brook trout, the state fish. So Marshall Run is a small mountain stream. It drains about 7.5 square miles, comes out of the George Washington National Forest and flows down into the North Fork of the Shenandoah River, just a mile downstream from here. And it's a steep mountain stream, and it has brook trout in it. And I'm standing here in front of the one road that crosses Marshall Run, Yankeetown Road, and a obvious culvert behind me. I lived near here, just up the stream half a mile during high school. And in 1996 there was a big blizzard in January that dumped 30 inches of snow, and then it was followed by rains and warm weather, and the snow melted fast, and Marshall Run was probably had the flood of the century. And it blew out the old low water crossing that was here, and it remained out for 6 months. And the valley residents that live up the road, including my parents, were happy when finally after 6 months they put in this new culvert you see here. And that was 18 years ago now. So let's see. I'm going to talk a little bit about ways that culverts can prevent fish from moving upstream. And several of those ways are demonstrated here on this culvert. There's at least 7 different characteristics of a culvert that can block fish passage. One of them here, you see the outlet is obviously perched above the level of the stream below. And depending on the height of that drop, fish may or may not be able to jump up and swim through the culvert. Another of the ways that a culvert can limit fish passage is whether or not there's a pool deep enough at the outlet for the fish to sort of get a run up and jump up into the culvert. In this case, the culvert, the water, when there is water flowing, flows out of the culvert and drops right down on that concrete footer, which is actually above the water level. So there's actually no way that a fish can jump up into that culvert, even if there is some water flowing through. And then once you get up inside the culvert, if the water velocity in the culvert is too fast, even if a fish does jump through, it won't be able to swim through the culvert. And you can see these culverts are, there's 2 box culverts, and they have a smooth concrete bottom that's not at all like the natural stream bottom. So when water is flowing through that culvert, it flows pretty fast and is probably a velocity barrier depending on the slope of the stream. Here we're at about a 2% slope, and 3% is kind of considered the limit for what you can have a passable culvert. Otherwise, in Virginia anyway, once you get above 3%, we're supposed to install a bridge. Another issue with culverts can be the depth of the water in the culvert. It can be too shallow for a fish to swim through, even if there is water. So in this case, the water would have to be way up to even get 3 inches of water in the culvert that a fish could swim through. And at that stage, that would be pretty high, fast water at that stage. So velocity would be a problem there as well. And then if a culvert is longer than 13 to 15 meters or so, which this one probably isn't, it can be a behavioral barrier to fish. They don't like to go through a long dark tunnel, and it's been shown that some species just won't do it even if it's not a barrier. And then there can be excessive turbulence, especially at the inlet of the culvert where the water comes into the pipe, and there can be a jump in velocity there, like a standing wave. When the water comes in, that can be a barrier to fish as well. So this culvert fails at least 4 or 5 of those criteria. There could be different reasons why a culvert will fail, different root causes. In this case, one of the main root causes, I think, and I haven't surveyed this culvert to determine for sure, but it appears to me that the culvert, the width of the wetted area when water's flowing through that culvert is quite a bit narrower than the bank full width of the stream from the top of the left bank to the top of the right bank. So what's happening every 1 or 2 years when you get a bank full flood, when it comes down to this culvert, it gets really narrowed down and funneled down. So that actually exacerbates the problem. The water velocity increases as it goes through that narrow culvert, and that's actually caused this pool to scour out deep. When they first installed it, the bottom of the stream would have been up to the bottom of the culvert, level with the bottom of the culvert, but it's been scoured down since then because of that increased velocity. Let's see, there's another. Oh, and the other thing about this culvert, which you probably can't see from here, maybe we'll show you later, upstream in the stream segment there's a lot of riprap that's been placed on both banks to confine the stream to stay in the channel during floods and not go out onto the floodplain where there's infrastructure like a road and like houses. And so there's quite a bit of riprap on both banks that keeps all that flood water in the channel, which also increases or prevents the stream from dissipating power as it during a flood, and making the problems here at the culvert worse and making it scour out worse here. I'm going to switch to talking about brook trout now. Brook trout are Virginia's state fish, and they used to be found in about 300 some subwatersheds in Virginia. Now they're found in about 30 subwatersheds. This is one of the subwatersheds that is considered to be a healthy habitat for brook trout. One of the very few in Virginia, and even fewer in the southeast U.S. And Trout Unlimited and the Eastern Brook Trout Joint Venture have done prioritization work for brook trout in the mid-2000s and came up with a map that showed by subwatershed which ones were healthy, sort of strongholds for brook trout, and which ones brook trout used to be in but are no longer in, and where protection can occur and where restoration can occur. So this was one of those where this was one of those watersheds identified for protection. Unfortunately, you can see there's a problem here with this culvert. There's only one culvert on this whole stream, but here it is, a major barrier. So brook trout are a member of the salmonid family, and this is a group of fish that has evolved to survive in cold, fast streams where the habitat changes a lot, and it changes often unpredictably. As a result, they've adapted by adopting a migratory lifestyle or life history in some cases, where in order to access their feeding habitats and their spawning habitats and their refuge hiding places from predators and from droughts and from freezes in the winter, they're able to do that by moving from one place to another throughout the seasons and throughout different parts of their life cycle. So there are different life history forms of brook trout. About 2 miles upstream of here, way up in the steep tributaries, there's about 6 pools that are formed by either bedrock or by large logs that, even though most of the summer the rest of the stream is dry, those pools always have water, and they support a population of brook trout. And those brook trout are likely stream residents that don't move a whole lot throughout their life, maybe around 50 to 100 meters just between adjacent pools. And they stay up in the headwaters. Now down lower here, we're close to the Shenandoah River, just a mile downstream, and there's another form of brook trout that lives in the Shenandoah River most of the year, or maybe used to. They're probably extirpated now. And they would swim up tributaries like this in the late summer and fall, and go on up to the good spawning habitat that's not available to them in the Shenandoah River, where there's clean gravel that's small enough for them to move and dig a nest in, and cold, clear, well-oxygenated water. Come up here to spawn, and then they'd spawn and go back out to the river. And I think I caught one of those my first summer living here in a pool just upstream. It was a nice big brook trout. Since his culvert's put in, I've not seen any more like that. And I suspect they're not getting up in here anymore from the Shenandoah River. Culverts are very widespread in the U.S. There's about one for every 700 meters of stream on average. And many of them, especially in the mountains, have been shown to be impassable to fish. Actually, the majority in a study in the Cheat River in West Virginia and in the George Washington and Jefferson National Forests, they found that the majority of culverts were actually impassable even to the strongest swimmers like brook trout, and the vast majority were impassable to other species of fish that aren't as strong as swimmers. Another study showed that upstream of impassable culverts in West Virginia, there were half the number of fish species and half the number of fish as downstream of those impassable culverts. So it has a big effect on the fish communities. So in the case of bad culverts, the problem is pretty clear, and the remedy is also pretty clear. In this case, we need to spend more money putting in good culverts and probably bridges in many cases like this instead of culverts. And we need to also develop and expand the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries Fish Passage Program to include inventorying and prioritizing culverts like this to be replaced. And in general, we just need to increase the attention and the amount of funding that projects that go to culverts.